I say that it's the most urgent problem in the world at the moment, but the most important is the environment. We're wrecking the planet. We're doing it at a very fast pace, and we're going to have to stop wrecking it, and that means huge changes. Too late for more offshore drilling, too late for more projects in the oil sands, too late for more huge, noisy windmill farms, all of this stuff. We have to get onto the real technology that is going to make it possible to do this job and do it correctly and do it quickly. It was told to me that they had developed both zero-point energy and cold fusion. And either one of these or both could be used to change the world by getting off fossil fuels in my opinion, as short a period as 10 years. We have to mobilize as if it was a mobilization of war for our own survival, which in fact, in many ways it is, you see. Well, then the other big thing is we have to change the world banking system. And a time has come for us to say, hey, enough is enough after 2.5 centuries or whatever of putting us in debt this way and making slaves of us all. Balance our budgets and get our economies back up to scratch, employ the unemployed people, and then do this tremendous job that has to be done of converting from an oil economy into a clean energy economy.
Hello, Apollo here with the Honorable Paul Hellyer. Beginning in 1963, Mr. Hellyer served as the Minister of National Defense for Canada. Paul has been outspoken on the U.S. government's withholding of UFO information, and as well as its aggressive stance on the extraterrestrial presence. He is the author of Light at the End of the Tunnel. We're happy to have you here, sir. It's an honor, Mr. Paul Hellyer.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. Let's jump right in. For those who may not be as familiar with you, sir, how would you summarize your work in the UFO field?
On the UFOs?
Yeah,
well,
environment
actually,
and what you're doing now.
Well, it's as far as the UFOs are concerned, I'm not a ufologist. And I don't claim to be. So in my book, Light at the End of the Tunnel, I only have one chapter on ufology. It's titled We Are Not Alone in the Cosmos. And I put it in there largely as a primer for the whole world of skeptics who might read my book because it has a different title and it's about different things, and perhaps get enough interested, and they would then carry on and learn more about the extraterrestrial people and what they have done and are doing. And so that's not my specialty. My specialty is really finance, international banking, and so that is my number one interest. And I say that it's the most urgent problem in the world at the moment, but the most important is the environment. We're wrecking the planet. We're doing it at a very fast pace, and we're going to have to stop wrecking it. And that means huge changes, both as far as the financial system is concerned and as far as the disclosure of exotic fuels that might have resulted from the back engineering of the extraterrestrial people's technology for 60 years now. And that these things all fit together. So we have to get change, big change there, and then of course big change with us humans too, and stop killing each other for various minor reasons, including religion, and start working together to try and build the kind of world that we all want to see.
Yeah. Now you, in that one chapter, and I know that you're one of your tie-ins with the UFO field is that the technology that that could help us with the environment that it's purported the extraterrestrials might possess, and could you comment on that?
Yeah, I think that they, working together with U.S. scientists, have come up with exotic fuels. It was told to me years ago, probably a decade ago, that they had developed both zero-point energy and cold fusion. And either one of these or both could be used to change the world by getting off fossil fuels in my opinion, as short a period as 10 years. And I have set 10 years as the deadline. I know some scientists who think we've gone past the Rubicon. And I said, well, even if that's true, and I hope it isn't, let's say that we've got 10 years to do something, but we've got to start right away.
Right.
And we have to mobilize as if it was a mobilization of war for our own survival, which in fact,
It is.
in many ways it is, you
Yes,
see. So
absolutely.
that's exactly the mode that we've got to be in, is get off our chairs and do something and do it now. And of course, there are some real problems involved. And one of them is the misinformation being put forward by the oil industry, which has lulled a lot of people into thinking that we've got 30 years or 40 years or 50 years, and they're still drilling for oil in the Gulf of Mexico, and they're still making new projects in the oil sands in Canada. And I'm saying, too late for all that. Too late for more offshore drilling, too late for more projects in the oil sands, too late for more huge, noisy windmill farms, all of this stuff. We have to get onto the real technology that is going to make it possible to do this job and do it correctly and do it quickly.
Right.
So that is the big thing. Well, then the other big thing is we have to change the world banking system.
Absolutely.
And stop letting a few private individuals create all the money as debt, which puts us all so far in debt that we can't afford to do anything, and cut back all over the place, and just to raise enough money to pay the interest on the debt we already have. And so we have to have a real change there. And what I'm going to recommend to or say to the Congress is that I wrote a book in 1999 saying that the next world war would be between the people and the banking system.
Right, right. That's very
And,
interesting.
and so now is the time to get at it, because they're mobilizing all their big guns, which are the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Federal Reserve System, and the Bank for International Settlement. They're getting all ready for their final assault on we the people.
Right.
And a time has come for us to say, hey, enough is enough after 2.5 centuries or whatever of putting us in debt this way and making slaves of us all, that we've got to reverse the tables and print enough money country by country to balance our budgets and get our economies back up to scratch, employ the unemployed people, and then do this tremendous job that has to be done of converting from an oil economy into a clean energy economy.
Is it fossil fuels? Is that a major problem in the economy?
Well, the fossil fuels, it is the major problem with the survival of the world.
Okay, right.
It is an important part of the economy.
Right.
And as an excuse, we say, well, this would be a tremendous disruption.
Right.
Well, of course. What do you know, if you're launching a war to save the world, you're going to have some disruption. And just as World War II, we stopped making automobiles, and we stopped doing this, and we stopped doing that until we could win the war, and then we started doing those things again. So we have to get off the oil economy and move to the new energies, and the people that are working now pumping gas will be helping build the engines of the new cars and the new airplanes and the new houses and all of the things that have to be done to revolutionize the world.
So you spoke about a 10-year window, and how do you see the world after that? In that 10
Well,
years?
if we were to attempt and succeeded in changing from the fossil fuels, the world would look very different in the sense that we'd have all new cars, new airplanes, and houses would no longer have gas furnaces, and we'd have little boxes probably in each one and all this sort of thing. But we would redirect our energies, and this is the important thing, into providing a more equitable and just world where some of us weren't overeating and others starving,
Right.
and where some of us get all the education that we want and others don't even get grade school, and where some people today are not having any medical care, and all of the things that if we were a just world, we would say, okay, now I talk about the kingdom of God on earth, and this is what we should redirect a lot of our military effort toward. And I define that as a world where every child has enough food to eat and clean water to drink and a roof over his or her head, enough clothing to keep them warm or dry or whatever, enough medical care that they don't have to die unnecessarily from some preventable disease, and enough education that they can, find out for themselves if they have the potential to go on and serve their fellow humanity as teachers or doctors or whatever, or laborers, whatever fits into the overall scheme of things. And you'd have a tremendous growth, but it would be a green growth, a sustainable growth. I mean, a lot of environmental says, well, you don't want to increase GDP. Well, changing all of the cars to new ones would certainly increase the GDP, but it's going to help save the economy. And what is your aim? And if your aim is a sustainable world, then let's do the things that have to be done and get all of the people of the world, especially the unemployed at the present time, involved and engaged in it. So that's sort of my take on the situation.
I have to ask you, since you were the Minister of Defense for Canada, and what insight can you, I know that's just not your primary focus in your field, but what insight could you give us in how major governments deal with the UFO phenomenon? Like, you know, what's Canada's position? Is there a Canada Roswell? I wanted to ask you that. Is there Canada?
If there is a Canada position, I'd like to know what it is too.
Okay. Okay.
There was a crash in, there probably been more than one, but there was a crash in northern Manitoba some years ago, and Grant, is it Campbell or Cameron, I keep forgetting which, has identified this and talks about it in his website and so on. And I guess one of the things that upset Canadians is that the Americans rushed across the border to seize it.
What?
Oh, yeah. And had armed guards all around, and as Canadian, even the people from the Department of Transport, which I used to head, wanted to investigate. They said, oh, no way you're going to get close to this machine. And so they checked with Ottawa, and finally Ottawa said, well, let them have it. But
So is there any openness is there any openness at all, or would you compare it to be better than the United States? Because the United States, like Mexico, is very open about it, and other countries around the world. I'm just wondering if Canada has any, would you compare them, or
I
you guys talk about?
I don't think it can compare them.
Really?
No, I don't.
Yeah, okay.
I don't even know how much information we have, if any.
Okay.
I don't think we're very much in the loop anymore. I think we probably were in the loop more in the 1950s
Oh, okay.
than we are now, but that's just my guess.
Yeah.
And I may spend a little time in the next year or so trying to find out what's going on, but I haven't had time. I was writing the book and been doing other things.
Well, your message is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand that in 1960 you inaugurated a UFO landing pad in St. Paul in Alberta, Canada. Can you tell us about that? Because in fact, if I may read this posted sign beside the pad, and it reads like this: the area under the world's first UFO landing pad was designated international by the town of St. Paul as a symbol of our faith that mankind will maintain the outer universe free from national wars and strife, that future travel in space will be safe for all intergalactic beings. All visitors from Earth or otherwise are welcome to this territory and to the town of St. Paul. So what was it like for you, and how did it all come about?
Well, that sounds great to me now. I'd like to be able to write that.
Yeah.
And it's beautifully written, and I don't think I was even aware of it. I probably read it at the time, but actually,
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a long time ago, and I don't really think I took the whole thing seriously.
I want to ask you about that.
No,
Yeah.
this was our centennial year.
Okay.
And senior ministers, of which I was one, were invited to go across the country and help celebrate the centennial.
Yeah, okay.
And so this little bilingual town in northern Alberta got in touch with me, and they were so persuasive. And they were doing more projects. They did more projects for the centennial than any other town in Canada or city.
So everything was covered.
Everything was covered. Yeah.
Even UFOs.
And
right?
even the UFOs. you see. So I said, sure, well, why don't I go out there? So I got on an airplane and flew out and participated in their ceremony. Had a wonderful day with them. They're just wonderful people. Just sound like
Yeah, I think that was something they would write.
yeah, that's something they would write. And I had a wonderful day with them.
Okay.
But
you didn't read the pad. You didn't read the sign of those.
well, I probably read it, but I would have gone in one knothole and out the other probably at the time. But so, looking back, I take it with greater seriousness than I would have at the time.
Also, in 2005, you accused the President George Bush at the time of plotting an intergalactic war. And I wanted to ask you about that. I think, I have a quote here, I believe it says, the United States military are preparing weapons which could be used against the aliens, and they could get us into an intergalactic war without us ever having any warning. The Bush administration has finally agreed to let the military build a forward base on the moon, and which will put them in a better position to keep track of the goings and comings of the visitors from space and to shoot at them if they so decide.
Yeah, well, I want to deny the quote.
Okay,
That you used.
Okay, good. I wanted to make sure, 'cause
Right.
I'm just,
But most of the rest is correct,
okay.
that they, in my opinion, have been developing
Just the
weapons.
basics of it, right.
Yeah, they've been developing weapons that are, in my opinion, designed to deal with extraterrestrials. They've certainly been designing tracking ways of finding out where they're going and when they're coming and going and all of that sort of thing. And I think even though the Army had been trying to get a base on the moon for years, I think that President Bush finally gave permission for them to start going ahead with it.
Right.
And so this is really just kind of routine if you get into the military
Right.
orbit of what was going on, because they have taken this whole phenomenon very seriously.
Right, yes, they,
And General Twining designated them as enemy aliens right from the beginning.
exactly,
And I don't know that that designation has ever been withdrawn.
right. I don't think it has.
I think it's a good thing we should try and find out.
Yes.
Ask Secretary Gates if
Yes.
anybody has ever withdrawn it, and if so, when was it done? I think it still applies.
Yeah.
And what some of us fear, of course, knowing General Eisenhower's reservation about the people into whose hands all of this technology fell, that it might be just used as an excuse for spending another few $100 billion of the taxpayers' money, providing lots of promotions for generals and more business for the industrial industries that support the war machine.
Yep.
So they have a motive for doing all of this, which they say, oh, well, we're concerned. Maybe there are some friendly people up there, but maybe there are some that aren't so friendly, and we can't take a chance. So we've got to have all this stuff ready in case they should start shooting at us. Well, if you go back in the history of the last 60 years, we're the ones that have started all the shooting.
Yes, yes.
And sure, they have retaliated in a few cases, and I think any fair person would say, well, if you shoot at me, and my life's in danger, I may want to take a crack back at you, just rather than just saying, kill me, my life's done, or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but all of the initiative, the hostile initiative, has been on our part,
Right.
rather than vice versa.
Yes.
So I think this is something that has to be examined very closely. And as part of the disclosure process, I would like to see that come out, and I would like to see people cross-examined under oath who say, well, there's a real threat. Because, why do you say that? How many times have you been subject to attack? And
Right.
were they provoked? And could you give us information to prove that that is so? And not just speculation, which would be good for maybe your purposes, which may not be in the best interest of the United States or in the world. So it's a toughie. And I like Carol Rosin's presentation to the Congress, and it is realistic. There's going to be exploration. You can't stop the military from trying to fly to wherever they're trying to fly to, and don't really want to. But you don't want them to take off saying, well, we're armed to the teeth, and the first person that even looks at us sideways, we're going to shoot first and ask questions afterwards. Because that is exactly what's been wrong with the world for thousands of years. And we don't want to say, well, okay, well, let's extend our barbarism to other parts of the galaxy, see? And so I think it's something we really have to dig into and
I
find
think it's fantastic that you're part of that. That's really wonderful. I'm curious about you mentioned seeing a report by Peter Jennings on the subject, and tell me about that and how they came about.
The ABC did a 2-hour special.
Yeah, right.
And he was a Canadian, and
Right, that's right.
and a friend of mine was the one who told me, actually the friend was the same guy that sent me the book, and he insisted that I watch this special because I was busy at the time, and I usually said he'd send me a lot of stuff, and I said, well, I haven't got time to read it, just pile it up. And I think he was counting on me to get more and more involved as time went on, and finally his faith paid off, and I proved to be what he had hoped for.
Oh.
He picked me really because he thought I would be fair and just in my decisions and my judgments. And so he was the one that got me interested. And I watched that, and I could see the wobbling back and forth because the skepticism, the reality. But you watch all these ex-policemen and pilots and military pilots say, hey, I've seen one of those things. And you say, no, are these people all liars? And maybe one or two, I don't know if one or two are or not, but I don't know how ABC would put together a 2-hour show and only pick out liars.
Exactly.
So
I wanted the same thing.
So I said to myself, hey, these guys are telling the truth.
Right.
And so there's got to be something. There's got to be something to this.
That's interesting. Also there was something about Stephen Hawkins commenting on ETs that I think you had a comment on that said that though most this is Stephen Hawking's quote, though most extraterrestrial life could be only in the form of small animals, there could be also nomads looking to conquer and colonize other worlds. What was your reaction to that statement?
Well, I really, to be truthful, thought it was irresponsible.
Right.
Here's a great scientist who obviously isn't up to date on what's going on in the world, and portraying a picture that was so far from reality. It was just the reality of his imagination that it was highly misleading. And consequently, I thought it was irresponsible, and I said so. Right. And I would say so again. If I was talking to him, I would say the same thing. I really am interested in these scientists who are saying, we've got to find a planet out there which will sustain life. And I said, well, why don't you go talk to your own government? They can give you a list of them.
How do you handle your critics or disbelievers in the whole UFO thing? Like they'll tell you that's a bunch of bunk. How do you deal with that? Because they're misinformed. They haven't done that research at all.
I've got one today, and I was just figuring out whether I was going to give him an impolite reply or polite. But I've decided on the polite, and say that he's really proving the point. He said, how could the government keep it quiet all these years? And I'm going to say, in a very nice way, that well, you're providing proof that they've been able to, and then give them the URLs of some of the speakers from the Congress and say, don't take my word for it, go and see some of the stuff that these guys have accumulated and see what you think of it.
I'd like to flesh out, if we could, just that one chapter that you have. And I understand, I really appreciate your approach with your book and trying to create a mainstream bridge to the issues at hand, the important issues, which of course is our environment, our economy. And you have that, you snuck or slid that little UFO chapter. And I'd like to explore and flesh out what that chapter said. I haven't read your book, sir, but what did you speak about in that chapter, and what was your intention?
Mostly I just went through my experience and then my interviews with these people that we were just talking about and others, and then some conclusions as to how many species there might be that we've identified already, what the ships look like, the variety from the small foo-foo fighters up to allegedly motherships mile wide. And
wow, that's a chapter. That's a great chapter, Paul.
It's a good primer.
Yeah, it is.
And that's what it's designed for, is to say, well,
get your teaser, a little teaser.
And yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot of my friends who have read it have been influenced because they trust me.
Right.
And they say, hey, if you're saying this, maybe there's something to it. Yeah. And this is the way it was intended. It's not a book on UFOs, but it's a book that gets people, I hope, a little bit interested. And maybe saying, well, if Heather says so, it could be so, or maybe it is so, depending on how well they know me. And then, of course, it has the relation that I draw, of course, between the reverse engineering and the possibility of using it to save the planet. And so it ties into the book. It's all part of a whole, comes together. But it's mostly a primer to get people interested.
When you mention different species, how many species do you think it is? What did you write?
Well, I don't know. When I had Ed Mitchell, Apollo astronaut, for dinner one night, and we were bantering back and forth, and he said, how many species do you think there are? And I said, well, somewhere between 2 and a dozen. He said, yeah, that's what I think too.
Really?
I think I list six in my book.
Yeah, you have 6 in your book.
Yeah. And I have since learned about the tall whites,
Right, right.
which I was unfamiliar with before, but I had a long chat with somebody who had worked there and who got to know them and to trust them and vice versa, and told me a lot about them, and I'll be mentioning those very briefly my address here.
Well, what a fantastic vision for our planet and our world. Thank you, Paul Hellyer, for all your work and efforts and what you're doing, and we're just so thankful for you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. You've been most kind, much too kind, but I just feel a responsibility. I'm nearing the end of my role, and I feel that as long as there's a problem, and there sure is at the moment, that I have to do what little I can to contribute to a solution.
And it's a great contribution, and thank you, sir. And that's all for us now. I'm Apollo, and thank you, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, sir.
Okay.